battery.
Hello YouTubers and welcome to another episode of the vlogs. As you saw this morning, it is raining outside unfortunately, and probably will be raining for the rest of the week. But we have to make the best of it, and as we spoke about in Bagnoles, you have to be prepared for all eventualities, including rowing in the rain, rowing in the colder weather, even though it is fully into summer now. But it is Friday. Congratulations to all of the Yam Squad for making it through another week. I've got my Friday shirt on. Do you have your Friday shirt on? Or do you have any sort of thing you do on a Friday to prepare yourself for the weekend? Let me know in the comments below. And as well, I've got my Yam Squad wristband on here that is on sale on yamsquad.com in the link in the description. But that's enough of that. Today is more training, prep for race time as we progress through the season, and after a session like we just had, it's time to fuel up, because remember, food is fuel. And we've made it into the crew room for breakfast today. We've got the breaded egg toast. What have you got for breakfast, Richard?
Some breaded egg sausage.
Oh, breaded egg sausage edition. And we're just off the water, like I said, in the rain, but we're talking about training bands today and sticking to them and making sure, and that's important to talk to your coach which one you should be at, and it's important to try and figure out what band you should be in for what split, etc. But we'll talk about that a bit more later, when it's a bit more quiet, because we're fueling up, because remember, food is fuel. went into the crew room for lunch to fuel up after the session on the water. More rain this afternoon as we paddle around the Henley stretch. Hopefully it does not rain for too long, but the forecast says otherwise. But it's Fish Friday. We've got some delicious fish and chips. But now it's time to fuel up with this Fish Friday. Oh yeah! And then we'll get to discussing sort of training bands, which ones you might know and what they actually are, and then maybe a little bit about the advantages of being in different ones. But we'll see when we get there. But first things first, fueling up! And we have made it outside of the club for another day on this Friday. The rain has stopped. Hopefully it stays off for as long as possible. The forecast doesn't say so, but that's for future self to worry about. Present self, we're talking about training bands or training zones, whatever you want to call them. And we'll start with sort of what are training zones or training bands. They are basically levels of intensity in which you're prescribed in a training program. And why do you want to have those training zones or training bands? It's so that you can work on specific things and not sort of blow your doors off if you're going too hard, or not get any benefits because you're not going hard enough. Every sort of program has their different sort of ways of describing their training zones or training bands, and every program has their different ways of measuring which bands they're in. You can have sort of heart rate zones to measure which bands you're in. You can have lactic acid level on your blood testing to see which level you're in. You can have level of perceived exertion to see where you are. But all of them sort of go to the same thing, which they stick to a scale that starts off very, very easy and then pushes up to the very, very hard. And so why are training zones, training bands important? Well, at different levels, you work on different parts of your physiology, your different parts of your fitness. So you can't work on your sort of aerobic fitness, your aerobic base, when you're going flat out. Maybe you get a little bit, but that's not something you can do. You can't sit on the rowing machine for an hour at 40 flat out. And the same thing goes, maybe you're trying to work on sort of your body getting used to being at a high rate and real high intensity. Well, you can't work on that if you're at a lower intensity. So you have your sort of anaerobic base fitness you can work on when your heart rate's a little bit lower, and then your anaerobic training when your heart rate's higher and it's a bit more intense. But that's very, very basic way of looking at it. But there's different zones and different training bands that can work on many different types of fitness, and it's very important to stick to those, because say you are working on, say, aerobic base, you don't want to float between different bands. And maybe, so for example, it's grey zone training when you say, okay, today we're doing a long erg, we're sitting on the erg for an hour and we're pushing, so I've got a guy next to me and we're a split different. And then half an hour in the erg, I see I'm 0.5 behind him, and then I push harder so I can go have a faster split than him at the end. But then by the last sort of 10-15 minutes, I'm actually pushing harder than my training zone would suggest for working on that specific type of fitness. And that's when sort of the training bands can really come in handy. You can measure, say, your heart rate, your lactic acid, your level of perceived exertion to see which zone you're in. And then also, once you get that, you know what that feels like, you can think in your head, oh, I'm working too hard here, this isn't the correct type of fitness. So you don't want to go into that sort of grey zone training where it becomes a grey zone, literally a grey zone between sort of the bands, because you don't want to go on one day and work on, say, your UT2, your base training, your aerobic base training, and then all of a sudden you're trying to pull really hard, and then that's pushing into the other levels of fitness, because not only will you probably not get the benefits to that latter part of the workout on that, wherever maybe you pushed into the anaerobic zone, but you will also lose the benefits you were getting in the aerobic zone, in the lower zone. And on top of that, you're spending, so since there's less effective on both ends of the scale, you're losing sort of benefits on both ends, you're spending too much energy for another workout that you may be trying to work on another zone. So that's basically about the training bands and the training zones. Let me know in the comments below what you think. It is very important to be able to know what you are doing, what your training bands, your training zones are, whether that is heart rate. I think heart rate is probably the most widespread and easiest thing to sort of to work out yourself, you basically need a heart rate strap. Some wrist ones are getting more accurate, but a belt strap, a chest strap is right now the most accurate, most reliable anyway. And maybe I'll talk about heart rate training one day and what to use. But it's very important to be able to know which band you're in and what that feels like for one, but that's experience can tell you that. And if you don't have that experience, heart rate, lactic acid, but that's like a whole nother thing. And then and speaking to your coach as well, okay, and if you don't know, because they could say, okay, this split should be what that zone should sort of be at. So then you can say, okay, I'm going for this workout, do the split you told me to do, and then you can kind of work from there. And over time, you know that, say, a 158 is my aerobic training zone. But that will be it for today's video, Yam Squad. Hopefully you enjoyed it. A little bit of a conversation again towards the end of the video, or at the end of the video. And as always, remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button, and as always, there's Catherine over there. As always, on a Friday, hopefully you enjoy your weekend, and have a good one.